Expected that within 3 years, this agreement will drive considerable Chinese investment in Canada's auto sector, creating good careers in Canada and accelerating our progress towards a net zero future and the auto industry of the future. And in order for Canada to build our own competitive EV sector, we need to learn from innovative partners, access their supply chains, and increase local demand. And to help deliver the full potential of these partnerships and bring down costs for Canadians, Canada has agreed to allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market, with the most favored nation tariff rate of 6.1%. This is a return to the levels that existed prior to recent trade frictions.
Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered what observers are calling one of the most consequential speeches by a Canadian leader in decades. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Carney outlined a powerful message for Canadians about how the country must navigate a dramatically changed world. Carney began by stating plainly that for decades, countries like Canada prospered under what was called the rules-based international order. Canada joined its institutions and praised its principles and benefited from its predictability. But Carney declared this bargain no longer works. The old order is not coming back, he told the assembled world leaders. We should not mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. Without directly naming US President Donald Trump, Carney referenced American hegemony and warned that great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons and tariffs as leverage and financial infrastructure as coercion and supply. Chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. He stated that you cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. Carney said Canada was among the first to hear the wake-up call of the new great power era, a reference to the US imposing tariffs last year and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. He emphasized that when middle powers only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemony, they negotiate from weakness. They accept what is offered. They compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty, Carney said. It is the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. The Prime Minister outlined Canada's strategy for this new reality. Since taking office, Carney said Canada has moved to change its trajectory by doubling defense spending and rapidly diversifying trade. Canada has signed 12 trade and security deals on 4 continents in 6 months. The past few days concluded new strategic partnerships with China and Qatar. Canada is negotiating free trade pacts with India and ASEAN and Thailand and Philippines and Mercosur. Carney emphasized that Canada has agreed a comprehensive strategic partnership with the European Union, including joining SAFE, the European Defense Procurement Arrangements. He described pursuing variable geometry, meaning different coalitions for different issues, based on common values and interests. On Ukraine, Canada is a core member of the Coalition of the Willing and one of the largest per capita contributors to its defense and security. On Arctic sovereignty, Canada stands firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully supports their unique right to determine Greenland's future. The Prime Minister called for middle powers to band together. Middle powers must act together because if you are not at the table, you are on the menu, Carney stated. He said this is not naive multilateralism, nor is it relying on diminished institutions. It is building the coalitions that work, issue by issue, with partners who share enough common ground to act together. Carney said that when great powers abandon even the pretense of rules and values for the unhindered pursuit of their power and interests, allies will diversify to hedge against uncertainty. They will buy insurance and increase options to rebuild sovereignty. Carney described Canada's approach as value-based realism, a term borrowed from Finnish President Alexander Stubb. To put it another way, we aim to be both principled and pragmatic, Carney explained. Principled in upholding human rights and sovereignty and territorial integrity, but pragmatic in recognizing that progress is often incremental and that interests diverge, and that not every partner will share Canadian values. We are engaging broadly and strategically with open eyes. We actively take on the world as it is, not wait around for a world we wish to be, he stated. Carney emphasized that Canada is calibrating relationships so their depth reflects Canadian values. The country is prioritizing broad engagement to maximize influence given the fluidity of the world order. Canada is no longer relying on just the strength of its values, but also on the value of its strength. Carney told the Davos audience that Canada has what the world wants, citing energy and critical minerals and an educated population and strong pension funds and a government with immense fiscal capacity to act decisively. Carney cautioned that a world of fortresses will be poorer and more fragile and less sustainable. From the fracture, we can build something better and stronger and more just, he said. The power of legitimacy and integrity and rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together. The speech received a standing ovation from the assembled leaders and sparked immediate global reaction. Senator Peter Bain, a former diplomat, told CBC that Carney's remarks were the most consequential delivered by a Canadian Prime Minister since Louis Saint Laurent laid out Canada's post-Second World War foreign policy direction in 1940. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's chief of staff and a former ambassador to the US said Carney was articulating a pretty clear strategy on what could be done so Canada does not become completely subservient to the whims of the superpowers. Colin Robertson, former Canadian diplomat and fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, called the speech pragmatic, saying, "Multilateralism is how we level the playing field, and if we don't do it, then the big ones are going to pick us off, one by one," as the Prime Minister pointed out. Robertson predicted it will probably become the Carney Doctrine, and that it will likely be looked at by other countries, particularly middle powers within Europe. When asked if cutting deals with China amid US uncertainty makes Canada overly reliant on the Asian superpower, Carney said he is playing offense. Less than a year ago, Carney publicly identified China as the greatest threat to Canadian national security. Now he states Canada should have a strategic partnership with China while saying there will be guardrails in place. "You need a web of connections," Carney explained. The China deal announced days earlier includes Canada allowing up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles at a tariff of 6.1% down from 100%. China will lower tariffs on Canadian canola seed from approximately 84% to 15% by March 1st. Canada expects Chinese tariffs on canola meal and lobsters and crabs and peas will be removed from March 1st until at least the end of 2026. The deals unlock nearly $3 billion in export orders for Canadian farmers and fish harvesters and processors.